The first thing I noticed was the rain. It was a classic Seattle morning, the kind where the sky is the color of a dirty nickel and the sound of water hitting the windowpane is a constant, soothing drumbeat. I've always loved the rain. It's the city's white noise, a sound that makes staying in bed with a warm blanket feel like the most sensible decision in the world. But this morning, something was wrong. I tried to roll over, to burrow deeper under the comforter and steal a few more minutes of sleep. But my body felt off. My favorite old t-shirt, worn soft and thin over the years, was tight, uncomfortably tight, specifically across my chest. It felt like I'd put on a shirt that was 2 sizes too small, binding and strange. I shifted, and a curtain of something soft and heavy fell across my face, tickling my nose and lips. Hair, a lot of it. My hair was short, a standard guy's cut I got trimmed every 4 weeks. This felt like a whole head of someone else's hair had been glued to my scalp while I slept. A low groan rumbled in my chest, or at least, it was supposed to. What came out was a soft, breathy sound, a note higher than I was used to. My throat felt tight and delicate. I swallowed, and the motion was different, smaller. "Okay, Ethan, wake up. It's just a weird dream." That was my first coherent thought. I'd had them before, those hyper-realistic dreams that leave you feeling disoriented for a few minutes after you open your eyes. I forced them open. The room was mine, no doubt about it. The same gray walls, the same poster of the National from their show at the Paramount 10 years ago, the same pile of clothes on the chair that my roommate, Noah, always gave me grief about. Everything was normal except me. I pushed myself up, and the world tilted. My center of gravity was all wrong. When I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up, I nearly pitched forward. I felt top-heavy, and my balance was precarious, like I was trying to walk on stilts for the first time. The floorboards were cold against my feet, but the feet felt smaller, daintier. My heart started to pound, a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't a dream. You don't feel the cold floor in a dream, not like this. You don't feel the strange, subtle shift of your own weight with such disorienting clarity. I stumbled toward the full-length mirror hanging on the back of my bedroom door. My hand reached out to steady myself against the wall, and I froze. The hand wasn't mine. It was slender, with long, graceful fingers and nails that were naturally neat and pale pink. There were no calluses on the palm from the guitar I was trying to learn, no network of faint scars on the knuckles from my brief, ill-advised attempt at boxing in college. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to crawl back into bed and pull the covers over my head until the world made sense again. But I couldn't. A horrifying magnetic pull drew my eyes forward. I took the last step and looked. The person staring back at me was a stranger. It was a girl, a pretty one. At that, she had large, terrified brown eyes, my eyes. I recognized them distantly in a cascade of wavy, chestnut brown hair that fell to her shoulders. Her face was heart-shaped, with a small, straight nose and lips that were full and naturally pink, parted slightly in a gasp of disbelief. Her skin was smooth and clear, with a faint flush on her cheeks. She was wearing my t-shirt, and now I could see why it was so tight. It was stretched taut over a pair of full, round breasts. I tried to speak, to yell, to say my own name, Ethan. The girl in the mirror's lips moved, and a trembling, feminine voice whispered, Ethan. The sound was airy, foreign, and it shattered the last piece of my denial. This was happening. This was real. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. I gripped the doorframe, my knuckles white. I had to prove it was a dream. I had to wake up. I reached up with my strange, delicate hand and pinched the soft skin of my cheek. Pain, sharp and real, flared. The girl in the mirror winced, her eyes welling with tears. I raked my nails across the back of my other hand, leaving angry red lines. I felt it. The sting was undeniable. I stumbled into my attached bathroom and twisted the cold water tap, plunging my hands and then my face into the icy stream. The shock of the cold was brutal, but it changed nothing when I lifted my head, dripping water onto the worn linoleum. The same girl stared back at me from the medicine cabinet mirror, her hair plastered to her face, her expression one of pure, unadulterated horror. This was my body now. The panic that had been simmering erupted into a full-blown inferno. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps, my legs gave out, and I slid down the wall to sit on the floor. My arms wrapped around my new, unfamiliar knees. I started to shake, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that racked my entire frame. I wasn't me. I was trapped inside a stranger. Who was she? Where did Ethan go? Was I still Ethan? My mind was a vortex of unanswerable questions. I stayed there for what felt like hours, just trying to breathe, in and out, in and out. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the window, indifferent to the complete implosion of my reality. Slowly, agonizingly, the initial tidal wave of panic began to recede, leaving behind a shaky, terrified curiosity. Hesitantly, I reached out and touched my body. My fingers traced the line of my jaw, which felt softer, less defined. They brushed over my collarbone, which seemed more prominent, more delicate. I moved my hand down, over my chest, my breath hitching as my fingertips brushed against the soft swell of a breast. The sensation was electric, alien. It was like touching a live wire. My skin was so sensitive. A shudder ran through me, a bizarre mix of revulsion and something else, something I couldn't name. I drew my hand back as if I'd been burned. This felt wrong. It felt like a violation, even though it was my own hand, my own body. Or was it? The lines were so blurred, my sense of self so fractured, I didn't know what was mine anymore. My body felt delicate, fragile. When I finally found the strength to stand up again, I noticed the subtle curve of my waist, the gentle flare of my hips. My old jeans would never fit over these hips. My legs were longer, leaner, the muscles shaped differently. Every movement was a discovery. The way my hips swayed slightly when I walked, the way my shoulders felt narrower. It was a complete anatomical rewrite, and I was the unwilling reader. This was a prison, a soft, curved, terrifyingly sensitive prison. A part of me, the part that was still Ethan, felt a deep, primal sense of loss. My strength, my solidity, my familiarity with my own physical form, it was all gone, replaced by this girl. But as I stood there, staring at my reflection, a different feeling began to surface, a tiny, insidious whisper beneath the roar of my panic. The girl in the mirror was beautiful. There was a grace to her posture, an elegance in the line of her neck. The fear in her eyes couldn't completely mask their depth and warmth. For my entire life, I had been, at best, ambivalent about my own reflection. I was just a guy, average height, average build, brown hair, brown eyes. Nothing to write home about. I never hated what I saw, but I never loved it either. It was just me, a functional container for my consciousness. This, however, was different. This body was a piece of art, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, I didn't hate it. The thought was so shocking, so traitorous, that I immediately pushed it down, burying it under another layer of fear and confusion. I needed clothes. My t-shirt felt obscene, a second skin that was broadcasting this new, horrifying reality. I went to my dresser, my movements stiff and awkward. I pulled out my largest, baggiest gray hoodie and a pair of old sweatpants. Pulling the hoodie on was a strange experience. The soft fleece glided over my sensitive skin, a sensation that was far more pronounced than I'd ever felt before. It was almost too much. I felt raw, exposed, as if I'd lost a layer of skin. The sweatpants were a disaster. I could barely get them over my hips, and when I did, they were baggy in the legs but uncomfortably tight around my waist and rear. I tugged the hoodie down as far as it would go, trying to hide the new curves that felt like a betrayal. I looked in the mirror again, a girl in oversized, ill-fitting men's clothes. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and haunted. The long hair was the biggest giveaway. I frantically tried to pull it back, but my clumsy fingers didn't know what to do. I eventually just tucked it all into the hood of the sweatshirt, pulling it tight around my face. I looked ridiculous, like a turtle peeking out of its shell, but at least the most obvious evidence was hidden. Just then, a sharp rap on my door made me jump a foot in the air. "Ethan, you up, man? You're gonna be late for work." Noah, my blood ran cold, my best friend, my roommate, the one person in the world I couldn't hide this from, who was standing just a few feet away, on the other side of a thin wooden door. My new high-pitched voice was trapped in my throat. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stand there, frozen, as the doorknob began to turn. "Yo, Ethan, I'm coming in," Noah's voice called out, muffled by the door. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I threw myself against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The doorknob stopped turning. "Whoa, hey, you okay?" he asked, his voice now laced with concern. I had to say something. I couldn't just stand here in silence. I opened my mouth, tried to force out a deep masculine grunt, anything to sound like myself. What emerged was a squeak, a pathetic, terrified squeak. Ethan Noah's voice was closer now, pressed against the other side of the door. "What's going on? Are you sick?" My mind was racing, trying to construct a plausible lie out of the wreckage of my reality. Sick. Yes, that could work. A sore throat. Laryngitis. I cleared my throat, which felt delicate and foreign, and tried again, aiming for a whisper. "Yeah," I rasped, the sound thin and reedy. Really sore throat. Lost my voice. There was a pause. I could almost hear him processing the sound, trying to reconcile it with the voice of the friend he'd known for 10 years. "Dude, you sound awful," he finally said, and I sagged in relief. He'd bought it, for now. "Do you need anything? Tea, water?" "No, I'm good," I whispered, cringing at how unconvincing I sounded even to myself. "I'm gonna call in sick, just need to sleep." "All right, man, let me know if you need anything. There's coffee in the pot if you change your mind." I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall, and the tension in my body drained away, leaving me weak and trembling. I slid down the door and sat on the floor, my head in my hands. That was too close, way too close. How was I going to keep this up? I couldn't hide in my room forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face him. The lie felt flimsy, a piece of tissue paper trying to hold back a flood. I needed a better story, something more substantial. My eyes scanned the room, desperate for inspiration, and landed on a photo on my nightstand. It was a picture of me, my mom, and my actual cousin, Jessica, from a family reunion a few years back. Jessica, she lived in Portland. We looked nothing alike, but the idea sparked. A relative, a cousin, visiting. It was insane. It was a terrible movie of the week plot, but it was better than nothing. It was the only lifeboat I could see. I spent the next hour in a frantic state of preparation. I had to become this fictional cousin. First, the hair. After a dozen failed attempts, I managed to wrangle the thick, wavy mass into a messy bun at the back of my head. Using a stray elastic I found in the bathroom drawer. It looked sloppy, but it was off my face. Next, clothes. I couldn't wear my own. I went online, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. I ordered a few basic emergency items for same-day delivery from Amazon, a pair of simple jeans, some plain t-shirts, underwear, a category that sent a hot flush of shame and confusion through me, and a bra. The bra was the hardest part. I had to guess at the size, using the measuring tape from my toolbox and a confusing online guide. The entire process felt surreal, like I was ordering a costume for a play I never auditioned for. While I waited for the package, I practiced. I stood in front of the mirror and tried to speak. I had to invent a new person. I decided on the name Emma. It felt simple, unassuming. "Hi, I'm Emma," I said to my reflection. The voice that answered was soft, a little shaky, but undeniably female. "I'm Ethan's cousin. I'm just staying for a few days." I repeated it over and over, trying to get used to the sound, trying to make it my own. I tried to walk, to move, to sit like a girl. I watched videos on my phone, trying to mimic the way they carried themselves. It felt like a caricature, clumsy and exaggerated. I was an imposter in my own skin, and now I was about to become an imposter in my own home. When the notification popped up that my package had been delivered, my stomach lurched. I cracked my door open and peeked out. The coast was clear. Noah must have been in his room. I scurried to the front door, snatched the brown cardboard box, and retreated back to the safety of my bedroom, my heart pounding the whole time. The clothes were clothes. The jeans were a soft, dark denim. The t-shirts were plain white cotton, but putting them on was a revelation. The jeans hugged my hips and thighs in a way I'd never experienced. They were designed for this body. The t-shirt was cut differently. shorter in the sleeves, narrower in the shoulders. It fit, and the bra. Putting on the bra was the most alien experience of all. The clasps at the back were a nightmare to figure out, but once it was on, the feeling of the straps on my shoulders and the underwire supporting my chest was a constant, undeniable reminder of my new reality. It wasn't comfortable, but it felt, correct, necessary. Dressed as Emma, I looked in the mirror, with my hair pulled back and wearing clothes that actually fit this body. The illusion was terrifyingly complete. I was a girl, a stranger who looked vaguely familiar around the eyes. I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to go out there. I took a deep breath, opened my door, and walked into the living room. Noah was on the couch, laptop open, a pair of headphones around his neck. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes widened. For a full 3 seconds, he just stared, his expression a mixture of surprise and confusion. Hi, he said, pulling off his headphones. Can I help you? This was it, showtime. Hi, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing a small, shy smile. You must be Noah. I'm Emma, Ethan's cousin. Noah's brow furrowed. Ethan's cousin. He didn't mention anyone was coming to visit. He stood up, and I felt ridiculously small and delicate as he unfolded his full 6'2" frame. He was looking at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He was trying to place me, to see the family resemblance. Yeah, it was kind of a last-minute thing. I lied, my hands twisting together in front of me. My car broke down on the I-5 on my way up to Vancouver, and Ethan said I could crash here for a night or two while it gets fixed. He's not feeling well. He's asleep in his room. I gestured vaguely toward my own bedroom door. Noah's expression softened slightly. Oh, right. He sounded terrible this morning. Laryngitis or something. I'm Noah. He extended a hand. I took it, and his large, warm hand completely enveloped mine. The contact sent a strange jolt up my arm. His grip was firm, gentle. Emma, I repeated, pulling my hand away quickly. Nice to meet you, Emma, he said, his eyes still studying my face. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, a hint of curiosity that went beyond just meeting his roommate's cousin. It made me intensely uncomfortable. He was looking at me the way a guy looks at a girl he finds attractive, and it sent a wave of cognitive dissonance through me so strong it almost made me dizzy. The rest of the day was a tightrope walk of excruciating tension. I tried to make myself as small and inconspicuous as possible. I claimed one end of the couch with a book I'd grabbed from Ethan's shelf, pretending to be completely engrossed. But I was aware of his every move, every glance. He tried to make small talk. So, where are you from, Emma? Portland, I said, my eyes glued to the page. Cool. What do you do there? I'm a student, I stammered, picking the first thing that came to mind. Graphic design. No way, that's awesome. I work in marketing. We hire designers all the time. Every question felt like a trap. Every answer a potential misstep that could bring the whole charade crashing down. I kept my answer short, my voice quiet. I kept my head down, letting my hair, which had started to escape its bun, fall forward to hide my face. But the little things were the hardest. When I got up to get a glass of water, I felt his eyes on me. I was so conscious of how I was moving, of the new sway in my hips, that I nearly tripped over the rug. When I bent down to tie my shoe, I was wearing a pair of old sneakers of mine that were way too big but were the only option my hoodie rode up slightly. And I saw his gaze flick down for a split second before looking away. My face burned. He wasn't being creepy or inappropriate, not at all. It was the kind of fleeting, involuntary glance anyone might make. But knowing that I, Ethan, was the object of that glance, felt profoundly, deeply weird. The most surreal moment came when I was making myself a cup of tea in the kitchen. I had found some lavender tea in the back of the cupboard, something my mom must have left on a visit. I was standing by the counter, waiting for the water to boil, when Noah walked in. "Smells good in here," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Just some tea," I mumbled. He was quiet for a moment, just watching me. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. I felt like an insect under a microscope. "You know," he said casually. "It's funny. You don't really look like Ethan, but you have the same eyes." My blood froze in my veins. "Oh," I managed to say, my voice tight. "I guess we get that from my mom's side of the family." He nodded slowly, still looking at me with that thoughtful, searching expression. "Yeah, must be." That evening, I retreated to my room as soon as it was socially acceptable, claiming I was tired from the drive. I closed the door and leaned against it, my entire body humming with the strain of the day's performance. I had survived, barely. Later, just as I was drifting into a restless, anxious sleep, I heard a soft knock. It was Noah. "Emma," he called through the door. "You still awake?" I sat up, my heart starting to race again. "Yeah. Just wanted to say goodnight. And, I hope your cousin feels better soon." "Thanks," I whispered. "Good night, Noah." There was a pause, and then he added, his voice a little softer, "By the way, that tea you were making, it's a nice scent. Smells like lavender or something. It's pleasant." I didn't answer. I just sat there in the dark, my body rigid, listening to his footsteps walk away. I couldn't understand why such a simple, innocent compliment made my heart pound and my whole body flush with a strange, unfamiliar heat. It was a compliment for Emma, a girl who didn't exist, but I was the one who felt it, a deep, resonant tremor in a body that was no longer mine, and for the first time, I wondered what it would be like to be seen as her, not as a disguise, but for real. The thought was terrifying, but it was also the first non-terrified thought I'd had all day. The next few days settled into a strange, nerve-wracking routine. I told Noah the garage in town was waiting on a part for my car, buying myself more time. I spent most of my days holed up in my room, a self-imposed exile, venturing out only for food or to use the bathroom when I was sure Noah was busy or out of the apartment. This room, once my sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. I was a prisoner of my own deception. But in that cage, a slow, cautious exploration began. The terror of the first day had subsided into a low-grade, constant hum of anxiety, and in its place, curiosity started to bloom. If I was stuck in this body, I figured I might as well learn how it worked. It started with the simple things, the mechanics of daily life that had suddenly become monumental challenges. My hair was the first major hurdle. It was a wild, unruly entity with a mind of its own. I'd spent my entire life with hair that required nothing more than a towel dry and a dab of product. This mane was different. I spent an entire afternoon on YouTube, watching tutorials on how to brush it without turning it into a frizzy mess start from the ends. Who knew? How to wash it properly, and the 1,000 different ways a person could tie it up. My first attempts at a ponytail were lopsided and sad, but after an hour of fumbling, I managed to create something that was at least functional. As I stood in front of the mirror, pulling the soft strands away from my face, I was struck by how different it made me look. It highlighted the delicate shape of my face, the curve of my neck. It was a small change, but it felt significant. Then there was skincare. My old routine had consisted of splashing water on my face in the morning, but this skin was different. It was softer, more sensitive. I found some of my mom's leftover face wash and moisturizer in the bathroom cabinet and tentatively tried them. The feeling of the cool cream on my face, the soft, clean scent, it was a small act of self-care that felt surprisingly calming. It was an intimacy with myself, or with this new self, that was both strange and soothing. My Amazon-ordered wardrobe was depressingly limited. The same jeans and white t-shirts every day were starting to feel like a uniform. A part of me, a part I was hesitant to acknowledge, wanted more. I wanted to see what this body could look like in something else. Something nice. Late one night, fueled by a mixture of boredom and a reckless curiosity, I found myself scrolling through online clothing stores. I lingered on dresses, something I had never given a second thought to in my entire life. They seemed like the ultimate expression of femininity, the furthest possible thing from my old life as Ethan. My cursor hovered over a simple, elegant black dress. It was made of silk, with thin straps and a cut that was designed to hug the body's curves. It was beautiful, on an impulse, my heart thudding with a feeling I couldn't quite identify. Was it excitement or fear? I added it to my cart and clicked buy. When it arrived 2 days later, I hid the package under my bed until Noah left for the gym. Then, with trembling hands, I unwrapped it. The silk was cool and smooth to the touch, impossibly light. It felt luxurious, forbidden. Taking it off the hanger, it seemed like nothing, just a slip of black fabric. I took off my jeans and t-shirt and after a moment's hesitation, slipped the dress over my head. The silk cascaded down my body, and the sensation was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't like cotton or denim. It was a whisper against my skin, cool and fluid. It moved with me, clinging and flowing at the same time. The fabric was so light that it felt like I was wearing almost nothing at all. The thin straps rested delicately on my shoulders, and the gentle friction of the silk against my thighs as I walked was a constant, distracting sensation. I turned to face the mirror, and my breath caught in my throat. The girl staring back at me was stunning. The black dress accentuated every new curve, the swell of my breasts, the narrowness of my waist, the gentle flare of my hips. It made my skin look pale and luminous in contrast. My shoulders, which I'd always thought of as bony, now looked elegant. My legs seemed impossibly long. I was still me, somewhere in there, but the packaging was so different, so beautiful. I couldn't deny it. I didn't just look like a girl. I looked like a beautiful woman. And for the first time, looking at my reflection didn't trigger a wave of panic or despair. Instead, there was a flicker of something else. Pride, admiration, a strange sense of freedom. As Ethan, I had been invisible, average, but this person in the mirror, she was anything but. This emboldened me. If I was going to wear the dress, I had to do it right. I found a small, forgotten makeup bag in the bathroom, probably left by one of Noah's old girlfriends. It was a treasure trove of mysterious tools and colors. I sat on the floor and, using my phone as a guide, began to experiment. My first attempt was a disaster. I smudged the eyeliner, creating a raccoon-like effect. The foundation was the wrong shade, and I applied way too much. But I wiped it all off and started again. More carefully this time. I applied a thin layer of foundation, just enough to even out my skin tone. I used a neutral eyeshadow to add a little depth to my eyes. The hardest part was the mascara. My hand was unsteady and I kept blinking at the wrong moment, getting little black specks on my eyelid. But finally, I managed a decent coat. It made my eyelashes look longer, darker, framing my eyes and making them seem even bigger. Last was the lipstick. It was a soft, dusty rose color. As I carefully applied it, tracing the new shape of my lips, the transformation felt complete. The splash of color made my face come alive. I stood up and looked in the mirror again. I tilted my head, letting my hair fall over one shoulder. I turned, watching the way the silk dress moved around my legs. A slow, tentative smile spread across my new lips. "Wow," I whispered, and the soft, feminine sound of my own voice seemed to perfectly match the image in the glass. I'm actually a girl." It wasn't a statement of panic anymore. It was a statement of fact, tinged with wonder. The fear that had been my constant companion for days was still there, but it was now mixed with this strange, exhilarating feeling of self-discovery for my entire life. My physical form had been a given, a non-negotiable fact. Now, it was a canvas, and for the first time, I wasn't repulsed by what I saw. I was intrigued. I was captivated. The reflection wasn't a monster or a stranger anymore. It was starting to feel like me, a version of me I was only just beginning to meet. The thrill of that moment, of seeing a beautiful stranger in the mirror and realizing she was me, was intoxicating. It was a dangerous feeling, because it made me careless. I became so wrapped up in this new identity, in the rustle of the silk dress and the unfamiliar weight of mascara on my lashes, that I forgot I was living a lie. I forgot I had a roommate who thought I was a sick man named Ethan, asleep in his room. The next morning, the apartment was quiet. I assumed Noah had already left for work. The sun, a rare and welcome guest in Seattle, was streaming through the windows, casting long, golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. Buoyed by a newfound confidence, I decided to try on a new purchase. It was a floral sundress, light and airy, with a pattern of small blue wildflowers. It was the opposite of the sleek, sophisticated black dress. It was cheerful, innocent, and undeniably feminine. I slipped it on. The cotton was soft against my skin, and the skirt flared out around my knees. I felt pretty. It was a word I'd never associated with myself in any context. I did a little twirl in my room, laughing as the skirt billowed around me. For a moment, I wasn't Ethan trapped in a girl's body. I was just a girl in a pretty dress on a sunny morning. I felt light, free, and completely unburdened. I was standing in the middle of my room, adjusting a strap on my shoulder and humming a tune I couldn't place, when my bedroom door swung open without a knock. Time didn't just stop, it shattered. Noah stood in the doorway, a laundry basket tucked under one arm. His other hand was still on the doorknob. He had clearly been expecting to find his sick roommate bundled up in bed. He was not expecting to find a girl in a sundress, bathed in morning sunlight. His mouth fell open slightly. His eyes, wide with shock, scanned me from head to toe. They took in the floral dress, the bare shoulders, the long hair falling loosely around my face, my bare feet on the rug. He didn't look angry or confused. Not at first. He just looked stunned. My entire body went rigid. The blood drained from my face, and the happy, carefree feeling of a moment before evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. We were frozen like that for what felt like an eternity. Him in the doorway, me in the center of the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The sunlight coming through the window seemed to spotlight me, illuminating every detail of my deception. The light caught the soft fabric of the dress, made my hair shine. I felt utterly, completely exposed. Noah was the first to break the silence. His face flushed a deep, embarrassed red. He blinked, as if trying to reset his vision, and quickly averted his eyes. "Oh my God," he stammered, pulling the door partially shut as if to give me privacy. Even though it was far too late, "I am so sorry. I thought Ethan was in here. I didn't know you were. I should have knocked. I'm so sorry." He was flustered, tripping over his words. He thought I was Emma. He thought he had walked in on his roommate's cousin in a state of undress. The relief that he hadn't figured it out was so immense it almost made my knees buckle. But it was immediately followed by a fresh wave of humiliation and a strange, new kind of tension. "It's okay," I managed to choke out, my voice thin and shaky. I instinctively crossed my arms over my chest, a futile gesture of modesty. You startled me." "I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry." "Emma," he repeated, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. I'll be out here." He pulled the door closed, and I was left alone in the sudden quiet. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my body trembling. That was it. That was the moment everything could have unraveled. And yet it hadn't. He'd seen me, really seen me, and his reaction wasn't suspicion. It was something else. The look in his eyes in that frozen moment before the embarrassment kicked in, it wasn't just surprise. I'd seen it before. On the faces of guys in bars looking at women in movies, in a million different places. It was a look of stunned, unguarded admiration. He hadn't looked at me with confusion. He had looked at me like he was seeing someone beautiful. The thought sent a confusing, illicit thrill through me. That evening, the atmosphere in the apartment was thick with awkwardness. We both avoided each other until he knocked on my door around 9. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant. Can I come in for a second?" My heart leaped into my throat. I was back in my safe uniform of jeans and a t-shirt. "Sure." He came in holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to me, carefully avoiding my gaze. He perched awkwardly on the edge of my desk chair while I sat on my bed. "Look," he started, staring into his mug. "I just wanted to apologize again for this morning. It was completely out of line for me to just barge in like that. It won't happen again." "It's really okay." "Noah," I said softly, "you thought it was Ethan's room. It was an honest mistake." He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. The awkwardness was still there, but so was that same intensity I'd seen before. That searching look. It felt different now, charged with the memory of the morning. "Yeah, but still," he said, then paused. He seemed to be wrestling with his next words. "Listen, this is probably going to sound weird, but what I said the other night, about you having the same eyes as Ethan, I don't know. It's more than that. You just You seem really familiar, but I can't place it." He shook his head. A small, frustrated gesture. "Sorry, that's not the point. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you don't have to hide in here all the time. You can, be yourself, out there." He gestured vaguely toward the living room. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then looked at me again, his expression earnest and a little shy. "And for what it's worth, that dress this morning, I know I wasn't supposed to see it, but you looked really beautiful, Emma." He said it quietly, matter-of-factly, but the words landed in the silent room with the force of a physical blow. A hot blush crept up my neck and spread across my entire face. It was a compliment directed at a fictional person, built on a mountain of lies, but it was the most genuine, heartfelt compliment I had ever received in my entire life, in either body, and it felt incredible. "Thank you, Noah," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't begin to untangle. It was a cocktail of gratitude, guilt, fear, and a terrifying, exhilarating flutter of joy. He gave me a small, shy smile, then stood up. "Well, good night." "Good night," I replied. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat on my bed for a long time, the coffee growing cold in my hands. His words replayed in my mind. "You looked really beautiful, Emma." A part of me, the old Ethan, was screaming that this was wrong, that I was a fraud, that I was letting this go too far. But another part, a new, stronger part, was blooming in the warmth of his words. That part felt seen. It felt validated. And it was a part that didn't want to be Ethan anymore. It wanted to be the girl in the sundress. It wanted to be Emma. Noah's words were a catalyst. The accidental reveal, which I had dreaded as the end of everything, had paradoxically opened a door. His compliment, his gentle reassurance that I didn't have to hide, gave me a sliver of permission to exist outside the confines of my bedroom. The lie was still my shield, but it no longer felt like a cage. Slowly, tentatively, I started to inhabit the role of Emma more fully. I stopped scurrying back to my room and began spending more time in the shared spaces of the apartment. I'd read on the couch, my legs tucked underneath me. I'd make tea in the kitchen, no longer feeling the need to flee the moment Noah entered. The dynamic between us shifted. The initial awkwardness from his walking in on me faded, replaced by a comfortable, easygoing camaraderie. We talked more. He'd tell me about his day at the marketing firm, the frustrations and the small victories. I, in turn, would invent stories about my life in Portland, about my fictional graphic design classes. I became a surprisingly adept liar, weaving a tapestry of a life I'd never lived. I hated the deceit, the constant fear of being caught in a contradiction, but I also loved the conversations. I loved the way he would listen, his head tilted, his expression open and engaged. He was seeing Emma, but he was listening to me. The thoughts, the opinions, the sense of humor that was all Ethan. It was a strange, disembodying experience, to be myself and someone else all at once. As I spent more time as Emma, I began to change in ways that went beyond just my appearance. I started to learn her. I learned that she had a different way of moving. Her gestures were smaller, more contained than Ethan's had been. I learned that she had a different laugh, a softer, lighter sound that came more easily. I found myself becoming more attuned to the emotional undercurrents in a room, more sensitive to Noah's moods. I was experiencing the world through a completely different filter. As a guy, I had moved through life with a certain level of obliviousness, a baseline assumption of safety and belonging. As a woman, even within the confines of my own apartment, I felt a new vulnerability. A creak in the floorboards at night sounded more menacing. A raised voice in a movie felt more jarring. It was as if my emotional armor had been stripped away, leaving me more open, more perceptive, but also more easily bruised. And my feelings for Noah were becoming complicated. I had always loved him as a friend, a brother. We'd known each other since we were kids, but the way he looked at Emma was not the way he had ever looked at Ethan. There was a warmth, a tenderness, an undeniable flicker of attraction in his gaze that scrambled my insides. When he'd smile at me, a genuine crinkle-eyed smile, My heart would do a ridiculous little flip in my chest. When our hands brushed as he passed me a mug, a jolt of electricity would shoot up my arm. These feelings were terrifying. They felt like a betrayal of our friendship, a betrayal of my old self. I was Ethan. Ethan was a guy, and Noah was my straight best friend. But I wasn't Ethan anymore, not physically, and this new body was responding to Noah in ways I had absolutely no control over. It was a purely chemical reaction, a magnetic pull that my mind was struggling to catch up with. One evening, we were watching a movie on the couch. I was wearing the black silk dress again, just for myself, enjoying the feel of the fabric against my skin. It was a chilly night, and Noah had thrown a blanket over both of us. During a quiet scene, I shivered, and the strap of my dress slipped down my arm. "Here," Noah said softly. Before I could react, he reached over, his movements gentle and deliberate. His fingers brushed against my bare shoulder as he carefully slid the thin silk strap back into place. His touch was feather-light, but it might as well have been a lightning strike. My breath hitched. The skin on my shoulder tingled where he had touched it. The space between us suddenly felt charged, intimate. The sound of the movie, the rain outside, everything faded into the background. All I was aware of was his closeness, the warmth of his body next to mine, the scent of his laundry detergent, and the faint, clean smell of his skin. He didn't pull his hand away immediately. It lingered for a fraction of a second, his thumb resting gently on my collarbone. I looked at him, and his eyes were already on me, in the dim light of the television screen. His expression was unreadable but intense. The air crackled. The distance between us evaporated until it was nothing, just a breath of shared air. I felt a powerful urge to lean in, to close that final inch of space. My mind was screaming 1,000 warnings, but my body was humming with a single, overwhelming desire. Breaking the spell, I found my voice, a shaky whisper. "If I wasn't me," I began, the words clumsy. "If I was someone else, would you still look at me like that?" It was a dangerous, nonsensical question, but he seemed to understand the heart of it. He didn't look confused. His gaze softened, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "I only see the person who's right in front of me." "Emma," he answered, his voice a low murmur. "The rest of it doesn't matter." His fingers finally retreated from my shoulder, but the ghost of his touch remained. The moment passed, the movie continued, but something had irrevocably shifted between us. He had seen past the lie, or perhaps he had accepted the lie so completely that it had become a truth. He saw a girl named Emma, and he was drawn to her. And I, the person inside, was drawn to him in a way that was new and terrifying and exhilarating. The name Emma felt like a costume, a role I was playing. It was the name for the lie. But the feelings I was having, the person I was becoming in response to his gaze, she felt real. She needed her own name. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the girl in the mirror, the one who liked silk dresses and the scent of lavender tea, the one whose heart raced when Noah smiled at her. She wasn't Ethan, and she wasn't quite Emma either. Emma was a fabrication, a shield. This person felt like a discovery. I searched for a name that felt right, a name that felt like mine, and then it came to me, quietly, simply, like it had been waiting there all along. Sophie. For the first time since that first horrifying morning, I looked toward the future not with dread, but with a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. I wasn't just a man trapped in a woman's body anymore. I was a woman, full stop, and her name was Sophie. Living as Sophie, even if only in the privacy of my own mind, was liberating. It was an acknowledgement of the person I was becoming. The name felt right, like a key clicking into a lock, but on the outside, I was still Emma, and the lie was a constant. Heavyweight, every conversation with Noah was a mix of pleasure and guilt. The closer we got, the more the deception felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was falling for a person who didn't exist, and I was falling for him from behind a mask. The breaking point came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Noah had taken the day off, and we were just hanging out, cleaning the apartment. He was tackling the kitchen while I was supposed to be organizing the bookshelf in the living room. I left my laptop open on the coffee table, a music playlist streaming. It was a simple domestic scene, the most normal we'd been since my transformation. I was in my room, looking for a dust cloth, when I heard the music stop. A few moments of silence followed, and then I heard a soft, questioning, huh. A cold dread washed over me. I walked back into the living room, and my blood ran cold. Noah was standing over my laptop, his back to me. He wasn't looking at the music app. He had minimized it. Open on the screen was my desktop, and right in the center of the screen was a folder I had forgotten about, a folder I hadn't opened in weeks. The folder was labeled Ethan, Old Pics. He must have clicked on it. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't breathe. He turned around slowly. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. He wasn't angry or shocked. He just looked deeply, profoundly confused, like he was trying to solve an impossible math equation in his head. He held up my phone, which I had also left on the table. He had opened the photo gallery. On the screen was a picture of me, the old me, Ethan and him, arms slung over each other's shoulders at a Mariners game last summer. "Emma," he said, and my fake name sounded strange and hollow in the quiet room. He held up the phone, then gestured to the laptop, then looked at me. He didn't need to ask the question. It hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. What is this? Who are you? The lie was over. There was nowhere left to run. The strength drained from my legs, and I sank onto the arm of the couch, my whole body trembling. The dam I had so carefully constructed inside me finally broke. A sob escaped my lips, a raw, ugly sound. Then another. The tears I had been holding back for weeks started to fall, hot and fast. I buried my face in my hands, unable to look at him, unable to witness the betrayal and disgust that I was sure were coming. "I'm sorry," I cried, my voice muffled by my hands. "I'm so sorry. Noah, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to tell you." I expected yelling. I expected accusations, anger, repulsion. Instead, I heard him walk over and slowly sit on the coffee table in front of me. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there, letting me cry. When my sobs finally started to subside into ragged, hiccuping breaths, he spoke, his voice quiet and steady. "Tell me," he said. It wasn't a demand, it was a plea. "Please, just tell me what's going on." So I told him. I started from the beginning, from that first rainy morning, waking up in a strange body. I told him about the panic, the fear, the reflection in the mirror that wasn't mine. I told him about inventing Emma, about being too terrified to tell him the truth. I told him everything. The words poured out of me in a torrent of confession and apology. I explained the clothes, the makeup, the process of learning to be this new person. And as I talked, I stopped using the name Emma. I started saying and then, my voice barely a whisper, I told him the last part of the truth. "I'm not him anymore," I said, finally looking up at him, my face blotchy and tear-stained. "I don't know how or why it happened, Noah, but Ethan is gone. And I'm not really Emma, either. That was just a name I made up to survive. I don't know who I am most of the time." My voice cracked. "But when I'm with you, when you look at me, I feel right. I feel like myself." He listened to the entire impossible story without interrupting. He just watched my face, his own expression shifting from confusion to bewilderment to something I couldn't decipher. It looked like empathy. When I finally ran out of words, silence filled the room again. I braced myself for the verdict, for the end of our friendship, for him to tell me to get out. Instead, he slowly reached out and placed his hand gently on my cheek. His thumb stroked away a stray tear. His touch was warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of my emotions. "Okay," he said softly. I blinked. "Okay." "Okay," he repeated. He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving mine. "I don't understand it. Not at all. It's insane, but I believe you." He paused, a small, wry smile touching his lips. "It explains a lot, actually, why you have his eyes." A choked laugh escaped me, half sob, half relief. "All this time," he continued, his voice low and serious, "I felt like I was going crazy. I felt this connection to you, this pull. It felt so familiar, like I'd known you my whole life. Because I have. He shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around it. I've been getting to know you all over again. His hand was still on my cheek, a comforting, solid weight. I know, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, and I like this person. I really, really like this person. He looked at me, his gaze so full of sincerity and affection it made my heart ache. Whatever your name is, whoever you were before. The acceptance in his eyes was so complete, so unconditional. It felt like a miracle. He saw all of it, the lie, the transformation, the impossible truth, and he didn't run. He stayed. Sophie, I whispered, the name tasting new and true on my tongue. My name is Sophie. He smiled, a real genuine smile that reached his eyes. It's nice to finally meet you, Sophie. The truth, once spoken, changed everything. The immense pressure I'd been living under, the constant fear of discovery, vanished. In its place was a quiet, fragile sense of peace. It was as if I had been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. Noah and I didn't try to define what we were. There were no labels, no grand declarations. We just were. We started again. From a place of honesty. He was endlessly patient, full of questions that were born of pure, non-judgmental curiosity. He wanted to know how it felt, what it was like. Is it weird, he asked one evening as we were making dinner together? Like, being you? It was at first, I admitted, chopping vegetables while he stirred a pot of sauce. It was terrifying. Everything was new. The way clothes feel, the way people look at you, the way my own body moves. But now, it's just my normal. He nodded, processing that. Do you miss it being before? It was a question I had asked myself 100 times. I thought about it for a moment, the knife still in my hand. I miss the simplicity. I said honestly, I miss not having to think about every little thing. But do I miss being him? No. I don't think so. I never felt as comfortable in that body as I do in this one, which is the craziest thing to say. But it's true. The confession opened the door to a new kind of intimacy between us, one that was built on a foundation of complete vulnerability. He had seen the deepest, most impossible secret I had, and he hadn't flinched, with that barrier gone. The small, tentative gestures of affection between us began to grow bolder. It started with small things. He'd rest his hand on the small of my back as he passed behind me in the kitchen. I'd lean my head on his shoulder while we watched TV. These moments were electric. Filled with unspoken tenderness, they were explorations, questions being asked and answered without words. The real test came when I decided I couldn't keep living a double life. My mom had been calling Ethan's phone for a week, and I'd been letting it go to voicemail, my stomach twisting with guilt each time. A few of my old college friends had been texting the group chat. I couldn't hide forever. I have to tell people, I told Noah one night, my voice trembling. My mom. At least, I can't just disappear, but I'm so scared. You don't have to do it alone, he said immediately. Taking my hand, I'll be right here. And he was. He sat next to me on the couch while I made the video call to my mom. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. When her face popped up on the screen, smiling, asking why her son hadn't called her back, my carefully rehearsed speech dissolved into tears. Through my sobs, with Noah's hand resting supportively on my knee, I told her everything. Her initial reaction was shock, then disbelief, then a flood of worried questions about my health and safety. But underneath it all, there was the unconditional love of a mother. By the end of the hour-long call, she was still confused, but she said, "Whatever is happening, honey, you're still my child, and if your name is Sophie now, then I will learn to call you Sophie." Noah was my rock through all of it. He was there when I sent the long, terrifying email to my closest friends, explaining the unexplainable. He held me when one of them reacted with confusion and silence, and he celebrated with me when 2 others immediately responded with love and support, asking when they could meet Sophie. He became my defender, my advocate, my greatest champion. Our physical relationship evolved with the same slow, organic pace. One night, after the emotional phone call with my mom, I was completely drained. Noah wrapped me in a hug, and I just melted against him, letting his strength support me. It wasn't a romantic hug. Not at first. It was a hug of comfort, of pure friendship. But as I stood there, with my head tucked under his chin and his arms securely around me, something shifted. I became acutely aware of the solid feel of his chest, the steady beat of his heart against my ear. My own body responded, a deep yearning sigh escaping my lips. I tilted my head back to look at him, and his gaze was already on me, soft and searching. The space between our lips, which had been charged with tension for weeks, finally disappeared. His kiss was gentle, tentative at first, as if he was asking a question. I answered by pressing back, by wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him closer. It wasn't a kiss of explosive passion, but of deep, profound recognition. It was a confirmation of everything that had been building between us. It felt like coming home. From then on, our affection was a quiet language we spoke fluently. Every touch was filled with a meaning that went beyond the physical. When he held my hand, it wasn't just his skin against mine. It was a promise of acceptance, a declaration that he saw me. Sophie, when he'd brush a stray strand of hair from my face, my skin wouldn't just register the touch. It would feel a blaze of gratitude and love. It was no longer about the fear of this new body, but about the joy of being in it, of having it be seen and cherished by the person who mattered most. The desire to be myself was no longer a struggle. It was a reality he was helping me build, one gentle touch at a time. The seasons changed. The relentless Seattle rain gave way to a bright, hopeful spring. The city bloomed, and in a way, so did I, living openly as Sophie was a process of rebirth. There were difficult days. Of course, awkward conversations, moments of self-doubt, the lingering grief for a life I'd left behind. But for every moment of difficulty, there were a dozen moments of quiet joy. The first time I went out in public in a dress and felt the sun on my bare shoulders without flinching. The first time a barista at our local coffee shop said, "Have a great day, Sophie," without me having to correct her. The first time I met my old friends and they embraced me, their new friend, without hesitation. Each experience was a small victory, a brick laid in the foundation of my new life. Noah was the constant, the steady hand at my back through it all. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale. It was built in the quiet moments, in the way he'd make me coffee in the morning exactly how I liked it, the way I'd steal his hoodies because they were comfortable and smelled like him, the easy laughter that filled our apartment. Our love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the profound comfort of being completely, utterly ourselves with each other. He had loved Ethan the friend. He had been intrigued by Emma the mystery. And he had fallen for Sophie the person. One morning, I woke up early. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of soft pink and orange. I slipped out of bed, leaving Noah sleeping peacefully, and went into the bathroom. For so long, the mirror had been my enemy, a source of fear and alienation. It had shown me a stranger, an imposter, a monster. But this morning was different. I looked at my reflection, really looked. I saw a woman with sleepy brown eyes and messy shoulder-length hair. I saw the faint lines around her mouth from smiling. I saw a face that was no longer a mask, but simply on my face. There was no trace of fear in her eyes. There was no confusion. There was just a quiet sense of peace. The girl in the mirror smiled at me, and I smiled back. It wasn't a forced smile, not a performance. It was a genuine, spontaneous expression of contentment. In that moment, the last vestiges of the conflict within me dissolved. I wasn't Ethan in Sophie's body. I was just Sophie. I was whole. I felt a sudden desire to mark the occasion. I went to my closet and pulled out a simple white cotton dress I had bought a few weeks ago but hadn't had the courage to wear. It felt symbolic of a new beginning, a clean slate. I slipped it on. The fabric was light and soft against my skin. I walked out into the living room. Noah was already awake, standing by the glass door to our small balcony, a mug of coffee in his hand. He turned as I entered, and a slow, warm smile spread across his face. He took in the white dress, my bare feet, the quiet happiness on my face. He didn't need to say anything grand or poetic. His eyes said it all. He held out his free hand to me. "Good morning, Sophie," he said, his voice soft. The name felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was my name. I walked over and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. The fit was perfect. "Hi, Noah," I replied, my own voice clear and steady. We stood there for a moment, hand in hand, before he opened the door to the balcony. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers from the park across the street. We stepped out together. The rising sun washed over the city, its golden light catching in our hair and casting our two shadows long on the deck behind us, the silhouette of a woman, and the man who had seen her, truly seen her, long before she had been able to see herself.